皆さん、こんにちは。私はリアニです。で、今日は IELTS to Speaking Part の話をして、することとしないことも話をしましょう。So, the IELTS speaking is made up of 3 different parts. We have part 1, part 2, and part 3. But for today, we will be looking specifically on the part 3 of the IELTS. では、始めましょう。Let's get started. First of all, it is very important to know how long this exam would take. これはどのぐらいにかかりますか? So, it takes for 4 to 5 minutes usually. 普通は4か5分ぐらいにかかります。So, part 2と part 3の違いは何ですか? What is the difference between part 2 and part 3? So, for part 2, the student is handed a question card or cue card. So, その question card の中に there are some questions. 質問があって、the students speak for about 1 to 2 minutes without interruption. それは1か2分ぐらいかかります。Meanwhile, in part 3, the examiner asks the student some questions. And of course, the student answers. So in this case, there is an interaction between the examiner and the student. So, 会話があります。It's more of like an interview. これは面接みたいな感じですね。So, さて、何の質問の種類がありますか? What are the usual questions that are being asked in the part 3? I will give you an example. Okay, as you can see here, for part 2, usually they ask you, for example, about a long journey that you have been. So in part 3, here are the usual questions, which is connected to part 2. First, what could the local and national government do to improve the public transport in your country? Or, what can be done to persuade more people to use their cars less and public transport more? And here, do you think the national government should do more to encourage people to spend their holidays in their own country? So as you can see, as you notice here in part 2, it's about the long journey. So here, for 3 questions in part 3, they are all related to part 2, but in a more abstract level. So usually, they ask you questions like about technology, shopping, sports, culture, etc. Now let's talk about the things that we should do in part 3 speaking of the IELTS. 今、この part 3の speaking のすることを話しましょう。とりあえず、first, you have to keep an eye and listen to the important keywords. When the examiner starts asking you questions, you have to listen very carefully, understand the question, so that you will be able to give the appropriate answers. よく聞いて、理解して、正しく答えてください。Next, ask if you weren't able to comprehend, specifically on the question that is being asked of you. So, for example, 例えば、the examiner asks you something, and you pretend that you understand what the examiner is talking about. This is a very big mistake because it might lead you to give the wrong answers. So, it's okay to ask. It is okay to do some clarifications if you don't understand the question. Okay? So, ask so you can give the appropriate answer to the questions. 次はね、next. Okay, here expand answers, give details, set examples, and reason out. So here, mainly, we don't have to give a no and a yes answer only. That is a no. You have to make expansion. You answer questions very well. You have to reason out, as we can see, give details, information. You give some examples, and you have to reason out. Another thing is that Stick to the topic. Don't go off the topic. 例えばね、if for example, examiner asks you about sports について、でもちろんスポーツのことだけを話して。So talk about sports, anything that involves sports, and don't go off the topic. Okay, think positive. You have to think in a positive way. できるよ, you can do it. If you think positive, you can do very well. Your confidence will boost, and yeah, it will be easier for you to recall all the things that you have studied for the speaking part of the IELTS. Another thing is here. Enhance your vocabulary in advance. 4 of the components which I've mentioned, they are going to mark you with 1, which is tango, vocabulary. You have to study vocabulary in advance. Learn some words that are unfamiliar to you. で、この言葉がbunot tsukutte, you make a sentence, there. You will not forget it. You will recall, you will remember the words that you have used, and you can use it when you do your speaking exam in the IELTS. So learn more advanced words, high-level words, and use it, and you can get a good grade, a good mark in this part of the IELTS. Next, relate questions to your own experiences. So here, it is really good to answer spontaneously about your experiences. So you can use your own life and personal experiences. And I think I've mentioned as well that in the event that you are not sure about the future, or you haven't thought about what you wanted to do, of course you can make things up. You can steal your friends' experiences and talk about it, make it your own experience. That is okay as long as they can mark you with any basis. As long as you speak in English and express yourself in English, that is fine. Okay, next. Okay, here. This is important. Use modals. For example, what are modals? For example, can, could, may, might, should. Okay, like for instance, you may be asked about considered as your best friend. So your response is like this. Maybe siblings may make a good best friends, like that. So yes, it is really good to use these modals that we have. Okay. Finally, the use of opinion expressions. What are opinion expressions? There are a lot of examples for opinion expressions. Most of the time, we tend to overuse the word I think. So you say, I think all over again. So you might as well use opinion expressions like, in my opinion, from my point of view, or as far as I am concerned. These are really good expressions to use as an alternate when you're trying to deliver your sentences. Now let's look at the things that we shouldn't do in part 3 speaking of the IELTS. So 今はしないことを話しましょう。First, okay, don't memorize your answers. It is not advisable to memorize your answers. When you deliver your response and it seems like it is scripted and canned, it might sound really funny. Rather, you have to focus on enhancing your vocabulary. In this case, when they ask you a question, you can answer spontaneously. Next, don't be bothered. Don't be worried if you make a mistake. The examiner expects you to make a mistake, that is fine. In the event that you make a mistake, you can correct it. If you can do so, go ahead. But if it takes time to correct your mistake and it might lead you to making more mistakes, just leave it. Okay? 間違ったら続いて. It's okay. Next, don't go far beyond the topic. Okay? Don't go far beyond the topic. Stick to whatever the topic is. For example, they ask you about sports. So you should talk about what the topic is about sports. Next, okay, don't use much verbal fillers. Verbal fillers such as these. Okay, so this might sound very annoying. The examiner or the people listening to you might not be able to focus on what you want to deliver or what you want to say. They are distracted with your uhs and your ums. So the message may not be clear to them, and you might lose some points in this part of the IELTS. Next, don't overuse I think. Okay, this phrase I think. Instead of that, you might as well use these alternative phrases, like for example, in my opinion, I consider, in my regard, I believe, or it's clear, it's obvious that, etc. For example, you can say, in my opinion, education is the best policy, like that. Okay, finally, do not worry about having an accent. Non-native speakers have variety and different accents that we cannot deny. You might worry about how you speak, like you have some flaws in your R and L sounds, which is really common. Don't worry about that. Rather, focus on how you speak in a clear way and in a normal pace. So even though you have an accent, as long as the examiner understands what you're talking about, then they can give you a mark in this part of the IELTS. Okay, so I hope that these tips will help you to do better in the IELTS exam. Okay, では、good luck! ありがとうございました。